in which, the uniforms, right, they give you with some fresh gear, they give you some fresh kicks and all that kind of stuff. You do want to go to a school in which the uniforms look good. And one of the biggest players in this specific game is Nike. All right. And Nike is fortunate enough to have had when I say Oregon is fortunate enough to have had the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, be a graduate from their school. So Phil Knight, and I highly recommend you guys go read the book Shoe Dog. He wrote about it. I remember reading it, and I was like enthralled as I was going through the pages, because when you think about how Phil Knight built Nike, the waffle iron, started out as a runner, and the way he really went through all the challenges. I didn't even know this until I read the book, but Phil Knight actually spent time as a college professor. This was before Nike actually blew up. So Phil Knight spent some time as a college professor so he can be on a certain level. And then you see what they're doing in the business world, right? So Nike eventually blew up, and they started to once they had the profits, they were able to now uniform the Oregon Ducks in a certain way, to where when you were bringing recruits in, they were looking at the unis, they were looking at the facilities, they were looking at the shoes they were getting, they were looking at how, I've been watching, it's been years since I don't think Oregon has had the same uniform combination on every game. Every game they have a different, and you guys can fact check me if I'm wrong when it comes to that, but I don't think Oregon has worn the same uniforms every week for the past 10 years. This is how invested Nike is in the Oregon football program. And this is, again, you see a direct trend between Nike's endorsement and them constantly having the top recruits, and now they're currently sitting as the number one team in the country. And you look at their facility, you look at everything they've done over the years, it's like, hey, you can't just discount the fact that Nike's involved, that Phil Knight is involved, right? So I say all this, and the reason that it's important to note these things is because we're still going to be talking about strategic partnerships, all right? Nike didn't get to Nike. Nike didn't blow up in the sports marketing world without, we all know the name, without Michael Jordan. All right. Without Michael Jordan, it was Michael Jordan who first really, they took a risk on him. He took a risk. They both kind of took a risk on each other. And to this day, they're still partners to this day. Right. So if you don't know, and I'm sure a lot of you guys who are listening to me now do know, but I'll reemphasize to anyone that doesn't know, but Jordan decided to sign with Nike because they were going to give him a dollar amount of every sneaker that sold. So it wasn't going to be your typical endorsement deal where an NBA player gets a certain amount of money up front and then they just kind of endorse the shoe. No, it was going to be Jordan is going to get a piece of the sale of every single shoe that gets sold. And obviously that blew up, and that became something that both parties have benefited from. All right. So the reason I'm breaking all of this down to you is because Michigan happens to be the first school that ever signed a Jordan, the first football school that signed a Jordan deal. Because when Jordan became big enough to kind of stand on their own, again, the Nike partnership is going to be there forever. But when Jordan was able to establish a brand, the Jumpman logo and all that, when they were able to establish that on their own, then they started sponsoring and they started doing a lot. Obviously, they were focused more on basketball when they became profitable enough to be able to sponsor certain teams. The Jordan Jumpman logo became a proud basketball outfitter. You obviously saw it at UNC, I believe UCLA. There were several organized basketball programs, college basketball programs, in which Jordan decided that he was going to put his Jumpman logo on and endorse them. But Michigan happened to be the first football school. And this was only 8 years ago. So let me play you this clip, and then we're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna kind of transition that in terms of how you can apply this information to your business. Roll the clip.
As Jim Harbaugh welcomed VIP guests, reporters, and some of his own players to Michigan's jersey unveiling, he took us back to how this day was born.
Second day on the job, I said I really want to be Nike. And about A month or two after that, my son Jay, younger guy, 26, 27 years old, said, "Hey, Dad, I think we should be Jordan."
And a year and a half later, the doors officially open to a new relationship. Jordan and Michigan showing off their new uniforms as the program makes history. U of M becomes the first school to wear the Jumpman logo on the football field.
It's a big deal, and you can tell by what's going on here the last couple of days. You seen the M-Den the other night. You see the people lined up down the street. You can tell, man, that it was something that was wanted by everyone.
So if you don't quite understand the appeal and hoopla around today's news, you're not alone. But think of it from an 18 or 20-something-year-old's perspective on this Michigan football team. For them, it's better than their favorite holiday.
Christmas or this?
This. As an older kid, you don't get as many presents as a little kid. So this is as good as it gets for my age.
Thank you, Jordan Brand.
All right, heck of a display, right?
I mean, did they build the
Enormous.
Man, I love that. I love watching that, man, because you see the kid, and I always go back to my high school self and think about how cool it is to get recruited, and then you're walking in, you see Jordans, you're getting free Jordans, you're getting free merch and all that. And this was 8 years. This was 8 years ago when Jim Harbaugh just came to the program, and obviously that eventually it turned into a national championship. I'm not just going to I'm not going to just give credit to the Jordan Jumpman logo for that, but obviously it helped. And it takes me to a point now with you guys, and I'm going to close out soon. When you're thinking about, when you're watching your games this weekend, or even if you're not a football person and you're just trying to figure out who is the right company to partner with, who can I take my brand, take my product, take my vision, take my service, take everything that I want to offer the world, who is the right person, who is the right entity, which is the right thing in which I should take my profits and be able to apply that and make it and turn it into an investment in which both of us are going to be thinking win-win. It's going to help both of us. This is a very, very important example. All right. It's a very important example that you should be pulling from. And you should be thinking, number one, how am I going to get more eyeballs on my service or my product or service? How am I going to get more eyeballs on it? Let's just look at the example that we're seeing between Nike, Jordan, and college football. All right. Nike is Ohio State and Penn State. There'll be millions of people watching this game tomorrow. Literally millions of people watching this game tomorrow. There'll be, over 90th. I think the Beaver Stadium holds like over, if it's the Beaver and Happy Valley, basically State College is just pretty much the main attraction in that entire town. But there'll be well over millions of people watching the Penn State versus Ohio State game. It's, number 3 versus number 4. It's going to have a huge impact on who's going to make the playoffs. You already have Ohio State who's coming in with 1 loss. You have Penn State that is undefeated. And if Ohio State does win, you get 2 one-loss teams in the Big Ten. And now it really becomes a little confusing about who, it is a monumentous game. And you know who's going to be winning regardless? Nike, folks, because Penn State and Ohio State are both Nike schools, All right. And, if you look at the grand scheme of things, Nike's going to be winning regardless. All right. And where were they thinking? How many eyeballs are going to be on my stuff? How many? And you got to understand, too, they started out as a running company. This was a running company. It was when they took that risk with Jordan, when they decided they saw what Jordan can do. Now they realize, okay, the athlete endorsements, and let's take it a step further and actually endorse the coaches and endorse the teams and outfit them all and make everything all about Nike. Then this is the opportunity that they were actually prepared for. So this is why they're continuing to stay relevant. All right. Actually, it's game number 1. That's game number 1. Okay. You watch that game. And if you're a college football head like I am, and you're a Michigan fan like I am, all right, you're going to stay right there. You're going to go and, stay wherever you're watching the Ohio State Penn State game, stay right there and watch Michigan take on the number 1 team in Oregon. When, again, we all know they have actually, and you guys can go look this up, what actually happened in NIL with this new NIL rule is there's something, I don't know how truthful this actually is, but you can go look this up yourself. But they have something called unlimited NIL. and Nike's name is being associated between Nike and Oregon, that there's something going on. And I don't know the details of it. You'd have to go do your own research on that. But there's something actually out there. If you type in unlimited NIL, you're going to see a ton of stories pop up between Phil Knight and the Oregon Ducks, which is basically insinuating whatever a high school, if the Oregon people come to Phil Knight and say, I want such and such recruit, Nike will say, you name the price, you name the number, whatever the number is, let me know what it costs to get him, and the check is written. That's how invested Phil Knight is in this program. And again, it's not confirmed, obviously, but it's very, very believable given the fact that it's been over 10 years and we haven't seen Oregon in the same uniform in 2 weeks ever. They have had different uniforms every single week. All right, that's how invested or tied in to this program that Nike is, right? So anyway, after you watch the after you watch the Penn State Ohio State game, let's see a comment coming in. How come they don't have a top 5? How come they never have? I don't know if Oregon has all this money. How come? All right. Well, I'll get to that in a second. The thinker asks, if Oregon has all this money, how come they don't have a top 5 recruiting class? How come they never have a top 5 recruiting class? I'll get to. And by the way, if you have a question, just leave it in the chat, and I'll get to it at the end. But let me just make this final point, and then we'll get to question. That money going away, a waste of money. Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. But anyway, when it comes to Nike, we're just talking Nike business, by the way, here, the thinker. So Nike business is going to have eyeballs on them when the Ohio State and the Penn State game, and then when we click over, we're going to see, well, the game right after, it starts at 3:30. It's going to be Michigan taking on Oregon. Oregon, again, Nike school, and then Michigan, like I just showed you, the first ever Jordan brand school. We see how these strategic partnerships in business, how they're going to be benefiting you regardless when you've made the right connection. When you've made the right connection in business, then it really doesn't matter what happens necessarily on the field per se. But what's gonna matter, what more so matters, is how many eyeballs you're able to get on your stuff. All right.